Welcome to another Thursday night Bible study, brought to you as a ministry of SIGBC.
Love your enemies. You know, it's hard enough to choose to put others ahead of ourselves. It's hard enough to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. But to be asked to love not just our neighbors, not just those who are our family and friends and acquaintances and those who we get along with, but to love our enemies is a tall order. And yet, in Luke chapter 6, verse 27 through 36, that's exactly what Jesus is asking of his disciples. When he says, "But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies." I teach some college classes on Wednesday mornings. A couple of classes, one from 9:10 and another from 10:40, I think it is. 10:50, yeah. And so the students are really quite attentive and quite eager to participate in the classes, but once in a while you'll have a student who had a bad night. They're really, really sleepy. And so maybe you need to go up to them and say, "Hey, maybe listen to this." And basically that's what Jesus is saying. But to you who are listening, I say, if you're truly paying attention, here's the hard request. Love your enemies. Now, what is the expression of love that we looked at the last 3 weeks? The true expression of genuine love is doing. It is an action that is based upon our feelings, but it is still an action that it results in doing that which is good. So he says, love your enemies, and the expression of that love is do good to those who hate you. But then he goes on and he says, not only that, but when someone curses you, bless those who curse you. And if someone mistreats you, pray for those who mistreat you. Now he's going to give some dramatic contrast illustrations. That is an exaggerated example where he says, if someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do what is good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies. Again, do good to them. And lend even to your enemies without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great. And you will be children of the Most High, because He is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. And so here Jesus is laying upon us a very serious mandate, or a very serious request. But he says, I'm not asking you to do the impossible. I'm just asking you to implement the virtue that God Himself extends to us. So be merciful just as your Father is merciful. And be kind just like God is kind to the ungrateful and even to the wicked. All right, over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be looking at 4 different aspects of this particular passage for four different observations from this particular passage. The first is that loving our enemies starts with a heart that genuinely seeks good for those who may even seek harm for us. So Jesus gives us a very difficult task, and that is the idea that loving our enemies starts with a heart that not just, oh, well, I guess I have to obey, but with a heart that genuinely seeks good for those who may even seek harm for us. And so he says, but to you who are listening, I say, love your neighbors? No. Love your family? No. Love your friends? No. Although all these things are good, he says, love your enemies. And then in this expression of love your enemies, he gives three additional criteria as if illustrating what he means by loving your enemies. Number one, do good to those even though they hate you. Number two, bless those even when they curse you. And number three, pray for them even when they mistreat you. Even when they do something that is not pleasant. Even though the experience that you have from them is nothing like the good that you have extended to them, still have a heart that not just loves your enemies, but a heart whose love results in doing good even to those who hate us, and who is able to bless from the heart even those who curse us, and who is able to genuinely pray for the good, not just pray for, oh, those poor people, God, I pray that you would help them to change. No. He's saying pray for the good of those who mistreat you. In other words, genuinely desire good for others even when they don't desire good for you. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 11 and 12, on that wonderful Sermon on the Mount, found in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, where Jesus is talking actually in various ways, illustrating the importance of genuineness in the life and heart of a believer. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 11 and 12, he says, blessed, or remember the word in the Hebrew and in the Greek, the word that is translated blessed actually means happy. So, blessed are you, or happy are you when people insult you? How? When they persecute you, how can you be happy? When they falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. In those situations, even rejoice and be glad. Why? Because it's about perspective. Because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. In other words, it's not what others do to us that is the basis for what we do to others. It's not how others treat us that becomes the basis for how we treat them. No, we are called to always be patient, always be kind, always be loving, always be good. Today I was driving back from Camp Rafaela, getting ready to take Mom and Dad over to Gifu, and I was kind of in a hurry. And there was a big old truck that was right in front of me, and I was absolutely convinced that he was deliberately toying with me by playing on keeping the speed low and slowing down and not starting out at a normal speed at a light. And so you only notice these things even more acutely whenever you're in a hurry, of course. But the time that I knew that this guy was toying with me was when he pulled out from a red light and was doing about 5 kilometers an hour very slowly starting out. And so I found my chance, and I finally, after about 10 minutes of following him, I passed him. And just as I was passing him, he sped up to like 70 kilometers an hour. In fact, just before that, he had been doing like 40 kilometers an hour, and then we came to a passing zone, and he sped up to 65 kilometers an hour to keep me from passing him. So I knew that he was probably toying with me. But if I let that bother me, I'm the loser, because I'll never see him again, and he doesn't even know who I is. And so there's no reason for me to be upset over someone whom I will never see again and who has no malice toward me personally. Yeah, what he was doing was not safe, and what he was doing was not nice, and but it's not personal. It only becomes personal if I choose to take it personally, and I get upset. Road rage, aori unten in Japan, is a very dangerous and very criminally inappropriate thing to do in Japan right now. Ever since a couple of years ago when this guy got out of his car and punched a guy in the face, and they changed the laws and made it so you lose a license for about 10 years if you are caught in road rage. Now it's getting less and less. Why? Because people are able to control their rage because they don't want to suffer the consequences of that rage. You see, it's always about a choice that we make. And so Jesus is pointing out in Matthew chapter 5, happy are you when people insult you. It's perspective. Even when they persecute you. Even when they say falsely all kinds of evil against you. As long as what they are saying is because of Christ, forgive them. Let it go. In fact, he says, don't just let it go. Choose to be happy. Rejoice and be glad. Because, God is watching. God sees the persecution you're facing and the ridicule that you're facing and the evil that you're experiencing. And so God will reward you. So knowing that God is there and sees your good and rewards your good, choose to be happy even when you're persecuted. So the first observation that we make is loving our enemies starts with a heart that genuinely seeks good for those even when they may be seeking harm for us. The second observation, and we're not going to be able to finish this entirely. We try to make these Bible studies about 15 minutes long each, and so we're going to have to continue this next week. But just to introduce the idea that the second observation we see is loving our enemies, the concept, is lived out in doing good for those who may even intentionally mistreat us for no reason whatsoever. So, the idea of loving our enemies is possible to comprehend because we can choose love over hate. We can choose to control our emotions. But Jesus goes beyond that and says, loving your enemies doesn't just mean not getting angry. Loving your enemies doesn't just mean forgiving them. Loving your enemies means actually choosing to be good to them even when they are not good to you. And so he says, if someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other also. I have heard a couple of explanations of this passage. One trying to explain it from a historical, cultural perspective of what it meant to turn the other cheek, and another from the perspective that all you got to do is obey God, and if the guy smacks you on one cheek, you turn the other cheek, and if they smack that cheek, now you're free to beat them up. There's all kinds of explanations as to why this doesn't mean what it sounds like it means, and the reality is it means exactly what it sounds like it means. It means don't get angry even when people do something that might naturally stir anger in our hearts. So if someone slaps you on the cheek, turn the other cheek also. And if someone takes your coat, don't withhold your shirt from them. Don't be mad because someone stole from you. Be willing to give if they are in need, if they stole because of a current need. And then he says, Look, give to everyone, even your enemies, if they ask you. And if anyone takes what belongs to you, don't demand it back. Basically, the principle is this. The principle of love your neighbor, extended to love your enemy, is lived out in the golden rule, do to others as you would have them do to you. You see, this is our 4th week of studying the subject of love as Christians. And each week we will see that love is not just a feeling. It's not a feeling that we fake. It's not a feeling that we pretend we have when inside we're raging. No, it is a feeling that is a choice, and it is a feeling that always results in good to others. And Jesus' illustration, dramatic contrast, is even if those other people that you are called upon to do good for are those who hate you, who lie about you, who mistreat you, still we are called to love one another, to love our neighbors, to love our enemies.
Thank you for listening. You can also join us in person or live on Facebook every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Japan time. This has been a ministry of Sakahogi International Grace Baptist Church.